Welcome to the deep dive. Today we've got a really unique mission for you.
We do.
We're taking a single, very complex legal case and using it as this kind of high-powered lens.
Right, to see the friction points.
Exactly. The friction between legal philosophy, freedom of expression, and, the overreach of modern state power. This is really tailored for you, the learner, who needs a swift but really thorough way to grasp these big ideas through a real story.
And what a story it is.
So our core subject today is the case of Dr. Chen Jingyuan. He's a respected physicist and academic. And he was sentenced to 1 year and 8 months in prison for this very broad crime called picking quarrels and provoking trouble, or PXQT.
And his alleged crimes?
Simply forwarding and commenting on posts online. Everything from satirical art to academic articles.
And that's the key. We're looking at this not just as, one bad court case, but as a systematic breakdown.
A breakdown that violates some major principles from Western thought.
Yes, exactly. Our sources for this deep dive critique the case using language philosophy, natural law, and Lionel Fuller's morality of law. The real question is, how did the system fail a scholar who literally used his own intellect to defend himself?
Okay, let's unpack this right away. Before we get into all the philosophy, we need the facts. What happened in the case, and what, right off the bat, made the whole process so controversial?
Well, the defendant himself, Dr. Chen, is a compelling figure. He's a physics PhD.
Right.
And his specialty is nonlinear complex systems. Now, you should, really hold that thought.
Okay.
Because his specialization is absolutely key to the prosecution's claims and to his own defense.
And the sources show the whole legal process was messy from the start.
Very messy. It starts with how the judicial system handled his appeal.
The procedural flaws they're glaring. His first trial wasn't even public. It was unopened.
And then when he appealed, which is his right, the appeals court just rejected it.
Without even holding a session.
Without ever opening a court session for review. That's profound, because it basically nullifies the two-instance system.
Which is supposed to be the safety net, right? The check on bad ruling.
It's the check. And if you can just reject an appeal without review, the first ruling is final, no matter how flawed it is.
Yeah.
The whole structure of judicial oversight just disappears.
And on top of that, Dr. Chen's appeal pointed out something else, something that looks a lot like selective enforcement.
Oh, a crystal clear example.
So why him? Why was he the one targeted?
Because he was the only one targeted. He pointed out that the original creators of the posts, and, hundreds, maybe thousands of other people who shared the exact same content.
Nothing happened to them.
Nothing. They were never pursued. Which strongly implies this was about him, about his identity, not about the act itself.
And that brings us to maybe the most disturbing part of this whole thing. This high academic level implies guilt paradox. It just feels like a complete reversal of legal logic.
It is. It really is. This is where they weaponized his background.
How so?
The court's ruling explicitly used his doctoral degree, his high knowledge level, against him.
Wait. So because he was smart, he was guilty.
That's the logic. The judges argued that because he's a PhD, he should have known better, that he should have been able to distinguish right from wrong with the information he was sharing.
Let's just pause on that. The idea that his intellect is proof of criminal intent, that breaks the whole concept of mens rea, doesn't it?
It completely shatters it. Normally, mens rea, the subjective intent, means the prosecution has to prove you knew you were causing harm.
Right, they have to prove it.
Here, they didn't prove anything. They just presumed he had the intent, what they call A, or knowing, because he was highly educated. His guilt was presumed from his status, not his actions.
So his status became the evidence. And the court ruled he scattered false speech, causing serious public disorder. But that charge, PXQT, it's notoriously vague.
It's incredibly vague, and that's the point. The sources all confirm the court never gave any concrete standards. What is false information when you're talking about political commentary?
Or a cartoon.
Or a cartoon. And even more, what is serious public disorder in a criminal sense? Without clear lines, the law becomes totally arbitrary.
And that lack of clarity, that vagueness, it leads us right into Dr. Chen's defense. A defense where he used his own scientific expertise.
This is where it gets so fascinating.
So he systematically attacked the three parts of the crime, right? Act, intent, and harm.
He did. He started by attacking the idea of harm or causation. And he used the exact science he's an expert in nonlinear complex systems.
Okay, so explain that. How does physics apply to Twitter, basically?
He argued social networks are complex systems, just like, say, a weather system, and these systems have a property called robustness.
Robustness, meaning they can take a hit.
They can take a hit? Think of it like a huge stadium. If one person stands up and yells, the system, the crowd, it absorbs that. It doesn't descend into a riot. Dr. Chen argued his actions were like that one person yelling.
And he had a term for his own role in that system.
He did. He called himself an edge node. In network theory, that's someone with few connections, low followers, minimal engagement.
So a nobody in network terms.
Exactly. Scientifically speaking, he argued his actions were a weak, random perturbation, a tiny little input that simply could not trigger what scientists call avalanche dynamics.
She couldn't cause the serious disorder they claimed. That's a powerful argument.
It's a very powerful argument, and it wasn't just theoretical. The sources say that after he was released, he conducted a sort of natural experiment.
What do you do?
The criminal evidence, the posts he shared, they were still online, unattended, and, crucially,
Nothing happened.
absolutely nothing, no public reaction, which empirically falsified the court's entire claim of serious chaos. The harm they sentenced him for never existed.
So he demolished the harm argument with science.
Yeah.
Then he went after the act itself, the very definition of a rumor.
Yes. He argued that the prosecution made a fundamental error, a category mistake. They were confusing different types of language.
What do you mean?
He broke down what he'd shared into categories to show that none of it was a verifiable fact that could even be proven false.
What were these categories?
First, artistic or symbolic works. Things like political cartoons, they're symbolic, they don't have a truth value, you know.
Right. It's an interpretation, not a fact.
Exactly. Second, subjective emotional expressions. His own commentary. That's opinion, feeling. You can't fact-check a feeling. And third, theoretical or academic articles. These are points of view, debates. They aren't factual statements for a court to label true or false.
So he's basically saying the court made a logical error, treating an opinion like it's a data point, like saying the sky is purple.
Precisely. The defense said the court committed a semantic category mistake. They treated art and opinion like verifiable facts, and by doing that, they stretched the word rumor until it had no meaning. If an opinion can be a rumor, any speech can be a crime.
That's the core of the act defense. And finally, he flipped their own argument about his intellect back on them to attack intent.
He did. It was brilliant. He used his scientific conclusion as a shield. He said, since my professional knowledge tells me my actions are harmless.
Because he knew his edge node status couldn't cause an avalanche.
Right. Then he logically couldn't have had the criminal intent to cause harm. Why would an expert in complex systems intend to cause an effect he knew was scientifically impossible? His own expertise proved his lack of malice.
The defense was logically airtight, factually, scientifically, and yet the sentence stood, which forces us to look beyond the case itself to the foundations of the law. And that's where the philosophy comes in.
It has to. The philosophical critiques really diagnose the structural failure here. A good place to start is with Lionel Fuller.
The 20th century American philosopher.
Right. And he argued that for law to be actual law and not just, tyranny, it has to meet 8 procedural principles. He called it the inner morality of law.
And if it fails to meet them, it's not really law at all. So which principles were violated here?
The first, and maybe the biggest, was clarity. That PXQT charge is a classic pocket crime, a vague trap.
Because no one knows what severe chaos actually means.
Exactly. The lines aren't clear. So citizens, even a PhD like Dr. Chen, can't rationally know what's criminal and what isn't. And Fuller says if you can't know the law, you can't be expected to follow it.
And the second violation goes back to what the court expected of him, right? The principle of possibility of compliance.
It was just shattered. The court demanded that he should have known the absolute truth or falsity of every single complex thing he shared.
Which is impossible.
It's completely impossible. It basically requires a private citizens to be a state intelligence agency. Fuller argues that if the law demands the impossible, it's not legitimate law.
And the third one, congruence between official action and declared rule. That ties right back to the science.
It does. Fuller says what the officials do must match the rule they say they're enforcing. The rule required proof of serious chaos.
But the sentencing had zero proof.
Zero. They just asserted it. So the official action was completely inconsistent with the legal rule.
And if we pull the lens back even further from procedural morality, we end up in natural law. The old idea, Lex inista non est lex.
An unjust law is no law at all.
Right.
Thinkers from Aquinas to Locke have argued that our written laws, our positive laws, have to align with higher principles. Reason, human dignity. When a law violates those, it loses its moral authority.
And in this case, the violation is the right to freedom of expression.
Correct. Natural law would say the whole point of government is to protect rights like that, not to punish nonviolent political expression with vague, arbitrary rules. When it does that, the law becomes a tool of oppression, not protection.
Okay, now let's get to the analysis of language itself, which is such a deep and powerful critique. It focuses on how the court just manipulated words.
Right. Think about the philosopher Wittgenstein and his idea of the language game.
Okay.
Dr. Chen's posts belonged in the language game of academic and political debate. The rules of that game include opinion, satire, argument.
And the court?
The court just yanked his words out of that game and threw them into a totally different one. The language game of criminal law, specifically disturbance of order.
By changing the game, they changed the meaning of the words.
They completely distorted the meaning. They turned critique into crime.
Which leads us to Austin's Speech Act theory about what language does.
Yes. Austin splits a speech act into three parts. The locution, which is just the physical act of speaking or typing, the illocution, which is the speaker's intent-like scholarly critique, and the perlocution, which is the actual effect on the world, like causing chaos.
So how did the court misuse that?
They ignored his intent, the illocution. They ignored the simple act of sharing, the locution. Instead, they just jumped straight to the end. They equated the mere existence of his words with the worst possible effect, the perlocution.
It's serious disorder.
Exactly. They treated the saying as the causing with zero proof of causation. It's a pragmatic fallacy. Or you could call it semantic tyranny. They convicted the consequence they wanted to see, not the intent that was actually there.
That is a terrifying idea, convicting a potential consequence. And Derrida's analysis on meaning seems to be the final chilling piece of this.
It is. Derrida said that when power tries to fix the meaning of vague terms like false or chaos, that act of fixing meaning is itself an act of power. It's an act of suppression. The court forced a single authorized criminal meaning onto language that is naturally ambiguous. It wasn't legal reasoning. It was an exercise of power. So this really raises a vital question for you to consider. When law abandons its own moral structure, like Fuller described, when it violates universal rights, like natural law says, and when it manipulates the very meaning of words, like the language philosophers show, does it stop being law?
Does it lose its legitimacy?
Exactly. All these analyses conclude that, in this case, the judicial process lost its legitimacy. It put a predetermined outcome ahead of reason, facts, and the law itself.
We started this deep dive looking for a thorough understanding, and what we found was this incredible case where one scholar's fight for his own freedom became this profound lesson in law, physics, and philosophy. It's a framework, really, for analyzing these systems anywhere.
It really is.
And the ultimate takeaway for you, the learner, is this. When you're navigating all the information in our digital world, the line between a verifiable fact, which could be a rumor, and a subjective expression or opinion, which cannot be a rumor. That's not just some academic argument.
No, it's the bedrock.
It's the bedrock of freedom of thought. So think about this. If knowledge and expertise and a high level of academic ability can be turned around and used by the state as evidence of criminal intent, what does that do to the value of critical inquiry? What does that do to intellectual freedom? If learning more just makes you more of a target, who will dare to question anything?